All right, if you're importing anything into the United States, I need you to listen up. Getting customs compliance right, well, it isn't just good practice. It's one of those skills that can literally make or break your entire business. So let's dive in and crack the code on exactly what you need to know. I want to start with just one number, and this number should really grab your attention: 42%. Now just let that sink in for a second, because for every single importer out there, this is a massive red flag. So why 42%? Well, that is the percentage of all customs penalties that stem from one single and often totally avoidable mistake: simple classification errors. Look, we're not talking about some complex, sneaky fraud scheme here. We're talking about basic mistakes. But these basic mistakes, they carry absolutely huge financial consequences. So this brings us to the heart of the problem. There is one specific code that you absolutely, positively cannot afford to ignore. It's called the Harmonized Tariff Schedule Code, or as you'll always hear it, the HTS code. The easiest way to think about it is like a universal language for products. It's this 10-digit number that tells U.S. Customs everything they need to know: exactly what your product is, what duty rate you owe on it, and which specific regulations apply. And let me tell you, getting this code wrong is incredibly expensive. The scales tip against you really, really fast. Just look at this example, right? A tiny 5% error on $1 million import, poof, that's a $50,000 impact. You've instantly underpaid by 50 grand. And here's the kicker: that's before customs even starts tacking on penalties for the mistake. Now, this brings us to a super crucial point, something a lot of importers honestly misunderstand. When it comes down to it, who's on the hook? Well, it's your responsibility, not theirs. And believe me, U.S. law is crystal clear about this. It doesn't matter if your supplier overseas gives you a code. It doesn't matter if your customs broker helps you out. At the end of the day, the full legal responsibility for getting that code right rests entirely on you, the importer of record. So really, it boils down to two paths you can take. On one side, you've got the easy way, which is also the really risky way: blindly using whatever HTS code your supplier gives you. It's a super common mistake, and it can be so costly. Then you've got the right way. That's where you verify your own code by exercising what U.S. Customs calls reasonable care. And all that really means is you've done your homework, you're confident the code is accurate, and you can show your work if they ask. Okay, so let's actually do it. Let's crack this 10-digit code. I know it can look a little intimidating at first glance, but I promise there's a logic to it, and it's not as scary as you think. Probably the best way to think about an HTS code is to see it as your product's DNA. Seriously, every little piece of this number tells a very specific story about what your product is. So let's take this example code right here for a portable computer and break it down, piece by piece. Okay, let's start at the beginning. The first two digits, in this case 84, this is called the chapter. Think of it as the broadest possible category. So Chapter 84 covers this huge range of stuff, basically machinery and mechanical appliances. All right, now the next four digits start to zoom in. This is the heading and the subheading, and they narrow it down quite a bit. So now we know it's not just any machine in Chapter 84, it's specifically a portable computer. And what's really important to know is that these first 6 digits are internationally standardized. Countries all over the world use them. And finally, you have the last 4 digits. Now, these are unique to the United States. This is the part that determines the specific duty rate and is also used to collect trade statistics. See how that works? It's pretty cool. It takes you from this giant, broad category all the way down to your very specific product. All right, so now that you understand the structure, how do you actually do it? Let's walk through a simple playbook that you can use to find the right code every single time. It's a 3-step process. Step 1, gather your intel. You have to know your product inside and out. I'm talking technical specs, what it's made of down to the percentage, what it's used for, everything. Step 2, use the rules. These are called the General Rules of Interpretation, or GRIs. It's basically the official legal rulebook for how to classify stuff, and you have to apply them in a specific order. And finally, step 3 is all about verification. You cross-reference your findings with the official HTS database, and then, pro tip, check the cross system. That's a public database where you can find past customs rulings on products that are similar to yours. Okay, so getting the HTS code right is huge, but believe it or not, that's only half the battle. The other critical piece of this puzzle is figuring out the correct customs value of your goods. Why? Because the duties you pay are calculated as a percentage of that value.
The main method for doing this is called transaction value. In simple terms, it's the price you actually paid or are going to pay for the goods. But, and this is a really big but, it's not always as simple as just looking at the price on your commercial invoice. See, you actually have to add certain costs to that price if they weren't already included. We're talking about things like packing costs, any royalties or license fees, and something called assists. A classic example is if you provided a mold or a die to the factory for free. Now, on the flip side, you can exclude the cost of international freight and insurance, but only if they are listed out separately on your invoice. Getting this calculation right is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so you've classified your product, you've declared the correct value. You're done, right? You can just relax? Well, not quite. We need to talk about your final responsibility, and that is being audit ready. And for how long do you need to be ready? Just burn this number into your brain: 5 years. Yep, that's the law. You are required to keep all records related to an import, I mean everything. Purchase orders, invoices, all your classification research, proof of payment, for 5 full years from the date the goods enter the country, and customs can come knocking and ask for them at any point within that 5-year window. So I want you to reframe how you think about all this. Proactive compliance isn't just a defensive chore you do to avoid penalties. It's actually a massive strategic advantage. When you have a solid compliance program, your supply chain becomes more predictable, your cost forecasting gets way more accurate, and your entire business just becomes so much more resilient. And that really leaves us with one final thought, a question I want you to really ask yourself about your own operations. Is your current compliance program a safety net that actually protects your business? Or is it a hidden liability, just sitting there waiting to cause a massive problem? Honestly, the answer to that question could define the future of your success.